Welcome back to Breaking the Chain with Thaddeus Sword. This is the 10th episode. I cannot believe, actually, I can believe, but I'm elated to have gotten to this point. 10 episodes it's a big deal because I've been wanting to start a podcast for, I can't even remember how long, but it's been an idea of mine, and that just never came to fruition until now. So I'm super excited to be on the 10th episode. So if you have been enjoying these episodes, or even if this is your first episode, I want to implore you to go ahead and hit that subscribe button. If you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and hit the subscribe button, hit that notification bell. It does help us out as a channel, but I do believe that this information, if you allow it to, you will glean something from it that could very well change your life. And I am absolutely confident in that statement. So if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify Podcasts, go ahead and hit that subscription or that subscribe button. And thank you all for the outpouring of love that you have been sending my way in regards to this podcast. And it does mean a lot to me. It does mean a lot to me to get your feedback because I endeavor to serve. I endeavor to speak something into your life that will affect it in a positive way. And, to get to this point for me, I had to overcome some limiting beliefs about myself, about what I was capable of, what was the important work for me, and so forth and so on. So that's exactly what we're going to talk about today. And this is the third week in a row where, I'm kind of going off script a little bit. And when I say script, what I mean, I've explained it in previous videos, but I typically have an outline that I use because I want my information to reach you in a way that is succinct and, bite-sized pieces that you can chew on and digest, right? We live in the information age where we're constantly bombarded with information from everywhere, from all kinds of sources. Some we don't even ask for. It's just in our face. So I endeavor to communicate in a way that is well received, not in terms of did I like it or not, but in terms of can I understand what he's talking about? It's so important. So we're just going off the dome. We're going off the cuff. I'm speaking my mind on this subject, in typical fashion, typical meaning the last 3 weeks, I had an outline for something that I wanted to speak about and started, hit record, and it was just, mush mouth, cotton mouth, stumbling over my words, couldn't get it out. And so I'm learning that if I'm going to be used, that I've got to get out the way. I've got to get out the way with this podcast. I've got to get out the way in every area of my life. I've got to get out the way as a musician, play the notes that need to be played right now, not the notes that I worked on, not the notes I want to give you to impress you, but the notes that are needed right now. So allow me to give you the thoughts and the words that I believe are needed right now. And it's about limiting beliefs. Limiting beliefs enter our world at various times. What do I mean by that? When we experience trauma in our lives at any given point, it's akin to a crack in our armor. It's akin to, you know, growing up in New Orleans in the summertime. If you left your window open at night, you were liable. I don't care how clean your house was. I don't care if you lived uptown or across the canal. If you left your window open in New Orleans at night in July, you were probably going to get some roaches in there. It's just what it is. So the same thing happens to us when we experience trauma, typically as a child, but not always, definitely not always. But when we experience trauma, our souls are left open and vulnerable. And when our souls are left open and vulnerable, then any and all things can enter. And oftentimes that's when our enemy uses those moments, those very specific moments, to make his grand entrance, to make his grand entrance into our minds, into our hearts, into our souls, which turn into our memories. And what happens if, as you grow and you don't necessarily heal from that trauma, what happens is that becomes an experience for you. That becomes your norm. How you act based off of that trauma becomes your normal way of life. And oftentimes it's unbeknownst to us. We can pinpoint, we can tell a story, we can, wax poetic about what happened to us. But what we don't often talk about, because it's not readily available to us, the information, what we often don't talk about is the fruit of that trauma that we've experienced. And for me, and I would gather a lot of you, when you experience trauma as a little kid, for me, what it did to me was it limited my beliefs about myself. So we were all created uniquely and wonderfully made by God, and we were all created on purpose with a purpose. And because of the trauma that I experienced as a kid, what that did to me was shrink me, shrink who I thought I could be, what I thought I could do, what I thought I could have. And what happens is when you start to believe those lies about yourself, what Myron Golden calls the lie identity, when you start to believe those lies about yourself, what happens is with your physical eye, you start to, in essence, look for that in the world. You look for evidence of what you believe. We all do it. We look for the evidence to support the lie that we have going on in our head. So for me, what that meant was if I didn't feel like I could have this, or if I didn't feel like I could accomplish this, then I gravitated quite naturally towards people, places, and things that perpetuated that. And so for many, many years as a child, my friend groups were just people that I essentially latched onto who, for all intents and purposes, bullied me, for lack of a better term. And I allowed it because I felt like that's what I deserved. I didn't feel like I deserved the respect that I did because I believed that my ceiling was so low that this is what I deserve. And again, all of that entered into my world, entered my atmosphere through trauma. And again, it's because we don't necessarily think about or understand the fruit of the trauma that we then live a life. We go into adulthood living these lies and not recognizing that the way we think, what relationships we enter into, what relationships we sabotage, how we treat ourselves, what we expect of ourselves and others around us, we go into adulthood with very, very broken ways of being, broken ways of thinking, broken ways of interacting with ourselves in the world. So I want to break that down. I want to break down why that happens. I want to break down how to recognize that fruit in your life. And most important, what do we do? What do we do once we have this information? Once we identify, oh wow, yeah, when this traumatic thing happened to me as a kid, it left me feeling exposed. It left me feeling vulnerable. And then because of that vulnerability, that led me down a path of this or that. Once we get that information, what do we do with it? Well, I can tell you what we do with it. We eradicate it. We denounce it. We denounce it and we take back what is rightfully ours. We take back what's rightfully ours. And, full transparency, I'm 46 years old right now. And these are things that I have heard about at least for the last decade plus of my life, but it takes time. It takes time often for the fruits of what you are learning to come forth. It takes time. So I want you to forgive yourself. I want you to give yourself a break if you recognize that trauma in my life has led me down a certain path unbeknownst to you. I want you to forgive yourself. Today is a new day. The days of regret are over. Destiny is at hand. Today is your opportunity to recognize the cyclical patterns in your life and to do something about them. So all of us know our story. All of us know what we went through as children, whether it be, divorce of your parents, whether it be abuse in any form, sexual, mental, verbal, physical abuse, whether it meant bullying, whether it meant whatever. I mean, the list of horrible things that you could have gone through are endless, immense. And you know your story. You know what you went through. And as an adult, again, you may be able to pinpoint what you went through, but have you ever taken the time to connect the dots? Have you ever taken the time to say, I went through this as an 8-year-old, but when I was 21, X happened, and put those things together? Why is it important to do that? Because it's so important for us to connect the dots to make it make sense so that we can break those chains and avoid these types of things perpetuating in our lives. So that's why I titled this podcast Break the Chain, because it is a chain that binds us. It's a chain. When you experience trauma in your life, it's like a chain. And unless you recognize what that chain is, you can't truly be free. And who the Son has set free is free indeed. So you may understand that, but you may still be walking in bondage in an area of your life because you don't recognize that there is a chain attached to you and you can break that chain. So once we recognize and understand the practicality of what we've experienced, the actuality rather of what we've experienced trauma-wise as children, now it's up to us to start putting the dots together. And so for me, and again, this is me, full transparency today. So for me, what that looked like again was that so many of my relationships were lopsided. So many of my relationships were either me attaching myself to someone so that they can, in essence, make me feel better about myself, or I attach myself to people who, basically, I don't want to say dogged me, but they basically, treated me like I expected to be treated, and I accepted it because I expected to be treated that way. So the trauma that I experienced in my life limited my value, limited how valuable I thought I was, limited how I expected to be treated, limited what I thought I deserved or didn't deserve. And decades of my life went by with that sort of pendulum swing of relationships. And I'm not just talking about romantic relationships. I'm talking about professional relationships. I'm talking about personal relationships. I'm talking about relationships. And you can scratch relationships out of the equation. My relationship with myself. Who am I? How do I treat myself? How do I care for myself? What do I think I deserve? What are my expectations when I'm just alone? And those are the things that, who you are when you're alone by yourself will tell the story. Because particularly in this day and age of social media, we're able to curate the image that we want people to see. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily a terrible thing. You know, I don't believe inherently it's a bad thing. It can be perverted and twisted, and manipulated and so forth and so on. That's a bad thing. But the person that you are when you're alone. How do you treat yourself? How do you view yourself? What is the self-talk going on in your mind when you're alone? That's where the reality lies. And I think when we talk about connecting the dots of the trauma we experience as children into young adulthood and wherever you find yourself now, I think that is the the connecting of the dots when you ask yourself the question, how am I? Who am I to me? What does my behavior look like when it's just me? And I think if you ask and answer that question, that will connect the dots between what you experienced traumatically and the residual effects of that trauma in your life. When I got to the point where I started to see cyclical behavior in my life, where I started to see how my limiting beliefs about myself were impacting everything that I did. You know, the limiting beliefs that I had about myself prevented me from reaching for things that could have been mine. The limiting beliefs that I had about myself accepted things that were never supposed to be mine. And again, this is not about regret because none of us can time travel. We can't go back and undo what was done. We can't go back and undo what was said. But what we can do is to gain knowledge today and put that knowledge into work, into action, and turn knowledge into wisdom. And wisdom is the practical application of knowledge. So, first step is to acknowledge what you experienced as a child. Where did your enemy enter your life and whisper in your ear these this negative soundtrack that we all have playing in the background? When did that happen for you? Once you acknowledge that, then look at your life, however many years you have behind you, and ask yourself, I wonder if this was happening in my life as the fruit of this trauma that I experienced. And the answer is probably yes. And once you understand that, now you're in a place to decide, that you no longer want to live that way. You want to find out who you are. What is your identity? What were you created for? And as you discover that and chase after that, then you're no longer running from your past or running from your fears, but you're running towards the highest calling. And that's a big difference. Many of us are running from something. Many of us are trying our best to be our best. Many of us are trying in vain to do all the right things, to, perfectionism and all of these things and chasing after things for clout or for validation. We're running from something. We're running from growing up in poverty. We're running from, you know, trying to prove something to people who are not even still alive, right? So we're running from something, but are you running towards something? And I promise you, if what you're running towards is purpose, then your enemy, your past, your trauma will never be able to catch up to you. It will never be able to catch up to you because when you're chasing purpose, when you're chasing destiny, you mount up with wings like eagles, you soar. And your enemy will get tired and say, we'll just go on to somebody who's slower and who makes a place for us. That's how that works. So I encourage you to start chasing after your purpose and your destiny. And the very act of you doing that you will smoke your enemy. You will outrun your past. I'm talking about what I know. So I had an experience today at the orthopedist, and she's a wonderful older doctor, and we were talking about what ails me right now, and we were talking about my profession and what I do for a living, and so forth and so on. And um, she said something to me. She said, well, we definitely have to get this fixed for you because what you do and who you are, what you bring to society, the world, is valuable. And the reason that that hit me so hard in a good way was because, artists, we're not in today's society, in many societies, we're not, doctors, lawyers, those are the noble professions that you want your kid to aspire to, right? You say, oh, my son's in law school. It's immediate. You say, oh yeah, my son's, uh, yeah, he's got a little setup on, the corner downtown where he's busking. Well, he's working on his chops. You know, that's not the thing that we hold up on a platform, right? So when she spoke to me that way, it echoed, it reminded me of the things that people very special to me have said about me before. It reminded me of those things. And when the right things are said and they connect with the other right things that have been said, it is resounding. It is resounding. And all you need sometimes is one person to say the right thing to set it all off in your mind. So your enemy is playing the numbers game. He's repeatedly speaking to you. He is repeatedly showing you signs like, hey, so you remember what I told you couldn't do? Look at this, what's happening in your life right now. This is evidence that you can't do it. He's playing the numbers game. He's going to constantly repeat in your ear over and over. And again, if you're hearing it and listening to it over and over, you will naturally start to see it in your life. There's I can't remember what the theory or the whatever it is, the theory, but there's a theory that, whatever we meditate on, whatever we're talking about and thinking about, we actually start to see it in our purview or in our surroundings. I forget what it's called. Somebody, if you know what I'm talking about in the comments, let me know what that's called. But that's what happens. Your enemy is whispering all of these lies to you. And if you don't denounce them, and you're going to start to see these things manifesting in your life. That's just how it works. But then again, all it takes is for one person to drop a truth bomb on you. And I mean, it's like, you spray raid and it spreads out and it's just like, it kills everything in its vicinity. And so that happened for me today. And again, this is not the first time that I've heard that or been spoken to like that by far. But, with so much noise that we have to contend with our past, the struggles of today, society, and so forth and so on, we can easily be removed from the truth about who we are. And I do believe that God will orchestrate. He will orchestrate, he will plant something or someone in your vicinity, in your pathway to remind you of your value, to remind you that you are important, to remind you to keep fighting the good fight, not the fight that isn't yours, but the good fight. And so I want to leave you with that. If you are struggling with limiting beliefs about yourself, I want to implore you to go back to your childhood and figure out when did it enter your life. Then once you figure that out, follow the trail of breadcrumbs and see throughout your life how that trauma has manifested in your life. And once you get those two pieces of the puzzle, I believe firmly that you'd be able to see how that's affected your life, and most importantly, how to eradicate it so it doesn't continue to affect your life. So I hope you enjoyed this episode of Breaking the Chain with Thaddeus Ford. Again, hit that subscribe button, Love to hear your feedback. Let's continue this conversation in the comment section. If you'd like to have a more private conversation, or if you have something that I can help you with or be assistance with, please send me a message. I've been enjoying getting and receiving and responding to your private messages. It means a lot to me that these messages are getting to you and getting to your heart, getting to your mind, your soul, and helping you to break the chains in your life. Until the next video, take care.